Chapter 17. Feasting in the Time of Plague. The foregoing chapters have established the facts. The European monarchies are juridically illegitimate, morally decayed, and economically parasitical. Yet there is a dimension that transforms all that has been set forth above from a historical juridical analysis into a bill of indictment of the gravest urgency. That dimension is time. We write these lines in the year 2026. The world has entered an epoch that future historians will, beyond any doubt, term a turning point. An economic crisis, comparable in scale to the Great Depression, yet unfolding according to an altogether different and more sinister scenario. Military conflicts that analysts increasingly characterize as the opening phase of a Third World War. A tectonic shift in transatlantic relations, which calls into question the very existence of NATO. An energy shock, brought about by the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz and the paralysis of hydrocarbon supplies out of the Persian Gulf. And at this very moment, when the European taxpayer must brace himself for the tightening of belts, for the growth of military expenditure, for energy poverty, and, it may be, for the dispatch of his sons to the front, at this very moment, the crowned heads of Europe continue to live as they have always lived. Palaces are being renovated, yachts are being serviced, private fortunes are swelling, and scandals such as the Epstein affair merely confirm the truth. These people not only have no right to their thrones, they have no right to demand of their subjects sacrifices that they themselves will never make. 17.1. The economic crisis of 2026, the shadow of the Great Depression and the contours of catastrophe. The Great Depression of 1929 to 1932 was a classic crisis of overproduction and financial collapse. The crisis of today is of a fundamentally different nature. It is a supply crisis brought about by a geopolitical shock. When, in February of 2026, the United States and Israel struck at Iran, and Tehran, in response, closed the Strait of Hormuz, the world found itself confronted with the greatest energy crisis in its history. Roughly 1/5 of the global supply of oil was blockaded. Energy prices soared into the stratosphere. The European gas benchmark leapt to levels that, only a year before, would have seemed unthinkable. The International Energy Agency has sounded the warning. Even after the resolution of the conflict, the restoration of production and of the transport infrastructure in the Persian Gulf region may require up to 2 years. 2 years of costly energy. 2 years of inflation. 2 years in the course of which European industry, already enfeebled by the rupture with Russian energy supplies, will be shedding its competitiveness. In parallel with this, Europe finds herself compelled to increase her military expenditure. President Trump has made it repeatedly plain that the United States no longer intends to subsidize European security. A scenario in which America withdraws from NATO, which until lately seemed unthinkable, is today assessed by the analysts of Citigroup as ever more probable. This signifies that the European nations will be obliged to raise their defense budgets to 3.5% of GDP and above, a level unseen since the Cold War. All of this is unfolding against the backdrop of a protracted war in Ukraine, which, from a proxy conflict, is steadily transforming itself into a direct, albeit undeclared, confrontation between Europe and Russia. Analysts at the RAND Corporation characterize the present situation as a multi-dimensional war, in which the conflicts in the Middle East, in Eastern Europe, and in cyberspace are indissolubly linked to one another. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Sir Keir Starmer, has already warned that the energy shock provoked by the Iranian conflict will bear down upon households for many months to come. This is diplomatic language. What is truly at stake is that millions of Europeans will be confronted with a choice between heating and eating. And in this predicament, every euro, every pound, every krona disbursed upon the upkeep of the royal families is money withdrawn from the systems of public health, of education, of social support, all of which are now more desperately needed than ever. 17.2. A war that will be paid for by the subjects, but not by the crowns. An historical law is inexorable. Wars are waged by the hands of commoners, while the laurels are reaped by the elites. Yet in the case of the modern European monarchies, this cynical formula attains its apogee. For now, these elites do not even command armies. They simply subsist, while others perish. Let us recall Belgium. King Leopold III, in 1940, capitulated to Hitler, abandoning his army and his people. His grandson, the present King Philippe, in the event of a new European war, will be evacuated in precisely the same fashion to a place of safety, whilst Belgian soldiers, Flemings, and Walloons, who do not even share a common tongue, will give their lives upon the front line. Let us recall the Netherlands. The royal family, in 1940, fled to Canada, leaving the country beneath the Nazi occupation. Today, should the conflict with Russia escalate into a hot phase, is there the slightest doubt that Willem Alexander and Maxima would not repeat that very itinerary? They would summon the Dutch to do their duty from a safe distance, sipping orange juice upon a villa in Miami. Let us recall Norway. Crown Princess Mette-Marit, whose correspondence with the convicted pedophile Epstein included the phrases, "Paris is good for adultery," and the question about naked women as wallpaper for my 15-year-old's room. Her stepson, the serial rapist Marius Borg-Høiby, stands in the dock. And this woman is to inspire Norwegian soldiers sent to defend NATO's northern flank? This is not merely immoral. It is a mockery of the very idea of patriotism. Let us recall Britain. Prince Andrew, stripped of his titles because of his ties to Epstein, yet still standing in the line of succession. Prince Harry, fled to California and trafficking in royal revelations. Charles III, whose fortune is estimated at £1.8 billion, and who pays no inheritance tax. These are the people who will serve as the symbols of the nation when British servicemen are sustaining losses upon the field of battle. The chasm between those who will do the fighting and those who will do the reigning has never been so deep. The youth of Europe, who today cannot find affordable housing in the Netherlands, hundreds of thousands of young persons live with their parents because rents are beyond their means, who watch their purchasing power melting away, who read in the news of an approaching war. These young people will be the ones called upon to take up arms. For what? For national unity, whose symbol is a corrupt, debauched dynasty, alien to them by blood. 17.3. Feasting in the time of plague. In Chapter 14, we reckon that the direct and concealed expenditures upon the 7 European monarchies amount to no less than 500 million to 1 billion euros per annum. In conditions of peace, this is brigandage. In conditions of war and economic collapse, it is treason to the state. Let us render these figures into the language of the military realities of 2026. 1 billion euros is the cost of roughly 200 Leopard 2A8 main battle tanks, the latest modification, or of 50 F-35 fighter aircraft. It is the annual budget for the upkeep of an entire mechanized brigade. It is the sum that could finance an air defense system for a major European city. Instead, the money flows to the maintenance of 240 footmen and valets in the Dutch royal court, the renovation of Buckingham Palace at a cost of £369 million, the annual uppunnage of princes and princesses whose sole occupation is to smile at ceremonial occasions, the guarding of royal residences, which, in Belgium alone, comes at a cost of 21 million euros a year. At a time when European governments will be raising taxes, slashing social programs, and printing money, thereby stoking inflation, in order to finance their defense, the royal families will continue to draw their millions. They will not renounce them for the sake of victory. They will not move into modest apartments in order to free up their palaces for use as hospitals. They will not sell off their art collections in order to purchase artillery shells. They will wait for it all to be over, as they waited in 1940, as they waited in 1914, as they have always waited. 17.4. Historical precedents. The lesson that has not been learned. History teaches that wars and crises are the grave diggers of monarchies, and not abstract wars, but precisely those in which the reigning dynasties demonstrate their incapacity, their cowardice, or their estrangement from the people. Russia, 1917. The House of Romanov fell, not because it lost the war. It fell because Nicholas II and his entourage demonstrated a total incapacity to govern the country in conditions of crisis. Whilst the soldiery rotted in the trenches without shells, the Tsar's family was absorbed in Rasputin and spiritualism. Whilst the workers of Petrograd starved, the Winter Palace remained oblivious. The result? A fusillade in the cellar of the Ipatiev house. Germany, 1918. The Hohenzollerns lost their throne, not as a result of military defeat as such. Kaiser Wilhelm II fled to the Netherlands even before the armistice was signed, abandoning his army and his country to be torn to pieces by the victors. He did not even make an attempt to fight for his crown. The cowardice of the monarch proved the final straw for a people exhausted by 4 years of war. Italy, 1946. The House of Savoy fell, not immediately after the war, but by the result of a referendum. Yet the outcome of that referendum had been preordained by 2 decades of the collaboration of King Victor Emmanuel III with Mussolini, and by his disgraceful flight from Rome in 1943. The people did not forgive their monarch either fascism or cowardice. What unites these 3 cases? 1. A crisis, war, laid bare the incompetence and the moral degradation of the dynasty. 2. The monarchs demonstrated their estrangement from the people and their disinclination to share in the people's sufferings. 3. The army and the bureaucracy turned away from the crown, seeing in it a millstone and not a symbol. The European monarchies of today find themselves in precisely this situation. The sole difference is that they have long since ceased to govern their countries. Their incompetence does not lead to military defeats. For those, the elected governments are answerable. Yet their moral degradation, their estrangement from the people, and their parasitism are visible to the naked eye. And when Europeans, tightening their belts and sending their children to the front, behold that Metamart was discussing naked women on wallpaper with a pedophile, that Juan Carlos was stashing his millions in Swiss offshore accounts, that Charles III pays no tax upon his billion-pound inheritance, they will put the self-same question that was put by the Russians in 1917, by the Germans in 1918, and by the Italians in 1946. Why are they still here? And the answer, unlike in preceding epochs, will be delivered, not by bullets and not by the guillotine, but by a simple referendum, the outcome of which stands preordained. 17.5. The Law of Ibn Khaldun. Why the pasteboard monarchies are doomed. There subsists an ancient Arabic wisdom, formulated by the great historian of the 14th century, Ibn Khaldun, in his Muqaddimah, the Introduction to History. He observed that every dynasty, every ruling house, passes through an ineluctable cycle. The first generation is that of the stern warriors and the unifiers, men of the desert and the sword, bound together by blood solidarity, asabiya. They seize power because they are strong in spirit and in unity. The second generation, their children, already dwell in luxury, yet still remember their fathers. They strive to hold fast to what was conquered, yet their asabiya is waning. They are united, not by a common struggle, but by a common inheritance. The third generation, the grandsons, are born within palaces. They have never known privation. They take power and riches as their due. They sink into intrigue, luxury, and pleasure. Their asabiya is reduced to nothing. And then a fresh, vigorous tribe comes forth from the desert and sweeps away the degenerate dynasty to begin the cycle anew. This theory, devised to account for the rise and fall of the Arab caliphates and the Berber empires, describes with a terrifying exactness that which we behold today in Europe. With but a single amendment, the modern European monarchies are not even the third generation of warriors. They are the fifth, the sixth, the seventh generation of those who never were warriors at all. Take the House of Windsor. Their asabiya was not the cohesion of a tribe, but the cold calculation of German prince-electors, set upon a throne by a parliament. Their conquest was the Act of Settlement of 1701. Today, their descendants, Charles III, his sons, his grandsons, are not even the third, but the 10th generation dwelling in the artificial hothouse of palaces and public relations campaigns. They have no asabiya. They have nothing but inertia. This is precisely what we observe in Europe today. The monarchies are not merely illegitimate. They are dysfunctional. They do not unite the nation, but rend it asunder, Belgium, Spain. They do not defend it against its foes, but flee at the first breath of danger, the Netherlands, Norway in 1940. They are not moral authorities, but are sunk up to their necks in scandals and corruption, Epstein, the offshore accounts. The Law of Ibn Khaldun is pitiless, and upon the crowned heads of Europe it has already pronounced its sentence. The question is not whether they shall fall. The question is, how many more of their subjects will they succeed in dragging down with them into the abyss? 17.6. Conclusion: The Crisis as Opportunity. This book is written to arm the reader with knowledge. Knowledge of who, in truth, sits upon the thrones of Europe. Knowledge of what it costs. Knowledge of what these people do behind the closed doors of their palaces. The crisis of 2026 is no mere economic downer. It is a moment of truth. A moment when the European nations must decide whether to continue maintaining a parasitical aristocracy that has lived at their expense for centuries, or whether, at long last, to sever the umbilical cord and to enter upon an age of republican maturity. The monarchies will fall. If not today, then tomorrow. If not tomorrow, then in 10 years' time. Yet fall they will, inevitably, for they are incompatible with democracy, with justice, with the most elementary common sense. And the sooner the Europeans grasp this, the less blood and suffering they will be obliged to spill for the sake of those who would never spill a single drop for them. Wars are won by nations. Crowns merely appropriate the victories. Is it not time to halt this wheel of samsara?